We're here in southeast Oklahoma, beautiful place in LaFleur County, kind of the center of our basic bear population. I photographed my first bear in the Ouachitas in 1974. Back then, nobody would believe you if you said there were bears in southeast Oklahoma. People just flat didn't believe you.
Early settlers, the bears were originally in Oklahoma and a native species here in the eastern part of the state in the mountainous region. And in the early 1900s, with the settlers moving in, habitat loss and overhunting, they were nearly extirpated in the region. So in the early 50s and 60s, Arkansas Game and Fish reintroduced bears over in the Ouachitas and Ozarks of Arkansas. And those reintroductions were so successful that the bears started migrating west as those populations grew.
Today, black bears can be found throughout eastern Oklahoma, with the densest populations in the southeast, primarily in LaFleur County. Researchers estimate our current population to be between 1,500 and 2,000 bears, and the population has been growing at a rate of approximately 4% each year.
In the early 2000s, Oklahoma Department of Wildlife realized that, okay, we're getting more bears over here. We really need to learn more about this species and see what we need to do to manage them. So we began our original research in 2001.
Sarah Bell's lighter now, but Sarah Bell showed up on my porch one evening back in the early 2000s. I think it may have been 01. And we had it all planned out that, she was going to be our research dude to come down here and we're going to get started.
So I had been a part of research in Alabama and Florida with black bears, and then had the opportunity to move out to Oklahoma to be a part of the very first black bear research here. And that was quite an experience to get to move in and learn a new study area and develop new trap lines and be a part of the launch of new research here with black bears.
She's done great research and great work with the bears on figuring out how many, a good population estimate, a good basis for us to start with. And since that early research, we've just pretty much had some sort of research going on ever since. Between the southeast and the northeast, Sarah has been the lead person in most of that.
A lot has changed since we began doing research in the early 2000s, technology-wise, but really our annual field work schedule is pretty much the same these days. We used to have callers that strictly relied on a VHF signal, and each caller has its own frequency, and we had to manually get out and track and actually identify where those locations were. Now we're extremely fortunate that we've actually got satellite or GPS callers. So on top of being able to track them manually, we have the opportunity to gather much more data from those callers. So our callers are now taking 2 or 3 locations per day, whereas we used to be able to get 2 or 3 per week. So what we're looking at here is an example of about a year's worth of location information from one female bear. In this particular map, to get a feel for the area that you're looking at, this is approximately 3.5 miles from the northernmost point to the southernmost, and once again, roughly 4 miles east-west. And the locations and her habitat use is strictly driven by the resources available. So it's going to be a smaller area if she's able to get all of those resources she needs in a smaller area, and larger if she has to travel a lot more to get use of those resources.
We put some collars on some males and found out that, a big male bear that lives in Daisy will actually come all the way back to LaFleur County to do his breeding in June and July, and then take off and go back. That's some neat information to know that the research kids and the callers give us.
So what we're looking at is starting in May, as soon as we finish up with classes at OSU, we're gonna get into the field and we're gonna set our trap lines. Actually, before that, we've already pre-baited all of those first trap lines to try to start letting the bears know we're coming back in the area. And then we trap from May through August every year, and we'll have 2 trap lines in the southeast and 1 trap line in the northeast. And then we wrap up in August. Fall, we monitor those collars from a distance. If there's ever any need for us to get out and work on any particular bear that's collared, then we get out there and do so. But otherwise, the fall, we just monitor from a distance with our GPS collars. And then in January, we'll start locating the dens of collared bears. So we locate the dens in January and then generally start working them and work them in February and March. Every den site, you know, we've already figured out that the female is in the spot that we're heading to. We start off with a sedation team, and everybody hikes in being as quiet as possible. We get into within a few hundred yards. And at that point, we prepare our sedation drugs and the jab stick. Then we slip in with just 2 or 3 people and try to sedate the female. And if all goes well, within 15 to 30 minutes, then she is sedated and we can get in, remove the cubs, and at that point we begin our workups. These bears really choose quite a diverse type of den site. You know, you want to think that a den is going to be a big cave or a big hollowed out log or something like that. And indeed, sometimes they are caves or crevices or hollowed out trees, and those are nifty little spaces. But in fact, we've had them quite frequently den just in what we call ground nests, and they literally are like a huge bird nest. And they find these little, it's almost like a little microclimate, and they find a spot where they feel like they can have a good view of their surroundings and be safe, and somehow they're blocked from the wind, and they just protect those cubs from the elements from above and keep everybody warm that way. So we've had all kinds of interesting spaces. They will do ground excavations where they dig out big holes in the ground, but those ground nests are really the most phenomenal to me. We've had quite a few that are quite successful at raising cubs just from those big nests.
Going into bear dens and working with bears and having the opportunity to hold cubs and weigh and measure cubs, and that whole part of the job is just something that you can't explain. And as a lot of our folks in the agency that get to go have had the opportunity to do this will tell you that's probably one of the highlights of anybody's career, is the opportunity to go do that.
4, Jeff.
That's awesome. Is that the first time ever? 4? Very healthy. Courtney says she's going to find 4. This is awesome. You have 4 blankets. You want my coat?
I've got 4.
Her collar's off of her. It's in there. That's good. One black one in there. Looks like.
Got a little Velcro.
The very exciting thing about the particular den visit is the fact that this is our first recorded case of a litter of 4 in Oklahoma. We typically have 2, and we get very excited with 3, but this was our very first quads, so we're pretty excited about that. An important part about the work that we're doing with these cubs is the fact that this is the very first time that they've ever been away from their mother. And at that time of year, because of that situation, they actually rely on their mothers to keep them warm. They cannot thermoregulate on their own. So when we have them away from their mothers, we use fleece blankets. We call them cub pockets. And we use those blankets and our jackets and our body warmth to keep them warm. So we take great care in the impact that we have at every den site that we visit. Our first goal is to be concerned with the welfare of the bears that we're dealing with. At the same time, it's really important for us to be able to share this opportunity to educate the public and share the reason for us doing this kind of research. And it's really hard to grasp why we're doing this kind of work if you don't actually have firsthand experience. Our goal is to share with folks who might be able to then take that experience and do something good for wildlife in the future, whether it be a legislator that might be able to help us with bills in the future, or a wildlife department employee who can then take that experience and share it with the public and let them know that this is why we're doing what we're doing. So while we're sharing that experience, we also take great care in limiting the numbers of people that we bring in with us. And certain sites we don't bring anybody because it's too sensitive. Other sites are a little bit more hardy, and so we have the opportunity to share the experience with a few more folks.
Write down the information. All right. And then we'll wipe it off with alcohol before we put it in. All right. And we'll get.
With the cubs, we collect important information. We take measurements. We give them a pit tag, which is our way of actually marking those individuals, and in case we ever get our hands on them again. And we collect hair samples from those little guys in case we ever want to do genetic work in the future. And the most important thing is that we're marking how many females and male cubs that she's having. Of course, we're focused on the females. We want more female recruitment for the population. So the female, we check her vital signs, of course, monitor those throughout the entire time. We change out her collar or just readjust it, whichever is necessary.
I got you.
Just don't want to get that crap. I know if I lay it down, it'll be everywhere.
Yeah.
Part of our monitoring the female and checking the collar, we also check all of the markings that we would have put on her during our trapping session. So we give them lip tattoos that have numbers that correspond with their ear tags. And so if they're missing their ear tags, then we'll give them new ear tags. If their tattoo is unreadable, then we'll give them new tattoos. And if we have to give them new ear tags, then we'll also give them a new tattoo corresponding. And then we make notes of all of their markings so that in the future, if we get our hands on them again, we know which bear it is. So we make sure all of the markings are up to date and make sure that all the tattoos are readable. Our females are sedated for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. During den season, it takes them longer to come out of the sedation at that point because their metabolisms are much slower. So while we still back away and give her space to recover, we stay until we are seeing good signs of her starting to come out of that sedation to make sure that she and those cubs are safe until she's ready to be the protector again. And the other thing that we do is we deploy a couple of game cameras on that den site so that we know exactly what's happened once we leave. And when we come back, then we can check in on her.